but we're prepared, right? We got everything.
Hey, we're live.
Huh.
So here we go. Yeah,
Oh,
we're
nice.
good.
Okay.
We're good to go now.
Cool.
I forgot that we needed to get Facebook going this morning, but here we are, ready to go in just a few minutes.
Pretty excited. Today's topic, for those of you who are watching right now or watching in the future, is elder abuse.
Yes, beware of bad people.
Not the most fun topic that we do, but probably one of the more relevant, one of the more important, even if the subject matter is depressing. And, fortunately, it's a serious reality that we'll see in our offices.
Yeah.
What do you say? Daily? Weekly?
Yeah.
Minimum?
Very, very often.
At least the signs pop up in our conversations with prospective clients regularly. Looking forward to this. Looks like we're on air in about 1 minute.
All right, trying to get all the board here worked up. It's tough right now. I'm still learning. So, hope everybody was safe from the storms last night. Got a little crazy.
I slept through them, man.
Yeah, I did too. I woke up a few times, but
I slept right through it.
All right, well, here we go. We're getting ready.
Center app from the App Store or Play Store and stay connected anytime, anywhere.
The following program offers general advice. It does not create an attorney-client relationship. Every person's legal situation is unique. You should contact your attorney before taking any legal action related to the subjects discussed in this program. Welcome to Aging Insights.
Here we go.
The only show dedicated to your elder care concerns and your resource for learning about how to manage your health, housing, financial, and legal needs. This is a live call-in program featuring John
No calls
Watson
today.
and Lisa Schulmeyer, elder law attorneys and senior advocates for the Art Latex. Aging Insight is dedicated to helping you navigate the challenges and blessing of growing older. So call in and ask your questions. The number is 903-793-1071. Now here are your hosts, John.
Hey, this is Ben King today with Alex Collins. John and Lisa are out, but hope everybody's having a great day today. And we're going to talk a little bit today, Alex, about elder abuse.
Elder abuse. Unfortunately, one of the more common situations that presents itself in our line of work. Never an easy thing to hear about, never an easy thing to talk about, but a very important thing to talk about.
Yeah, it's I think when we come to the office every day, it's not uncommon and it's actually expected that at some point, most likely that day, we may hear or going to hear about some family member who has had some type of financial exploitation that they're being taken advantage of in some way, and it's really a sad situation when it happens.
Absolutely, and the term elder abuse would bring to mind a number of situations, right? There's obviously physical abuse. That's something that is awful. That's something that only the worst of the worst actually would go through with. But that's something that we're usually not dealing with, right? But elder abuse obviously encompasses physical abuse. That goes without saying.
Yes.
We also have neglect. So neglect is just the same elder abuse. You're hurting someone physically, or you are not giving them their medication. You're not giving them you're withholding it. You're not giving them food when an elderly individual is dependent on you. That is also elder abuse, which, by the way, is a felony. Elder abuse is a felony. It is something that can be prosecuted.
Well, and what you just talked about, the physical abuse, the neglect, those are things that are very obvious. If those things are happening, everybody, it's going to be pretty obvious in most situations that something like that is happening. You're either seeing bruises, there's, heaven forbid, broken bones, somebody just getting more frail, losing a lot of weight. There are going to be those physical symptoms that you're going to be able to see that are going to be obvious. Whereas what we're going to talk a little bit about later today, some of the financial exploitation, where people are trying to get into the bank accounts, get assets from the elderly or vulnerable person. Those things aren't going to be nearly as obvious.
No, they're not as obvious to the outside world. It may be obvious to close friends and family. It may be obvious to the person themselves, which unfortunately is very common. They understand that something's happening to them, financially speaking, but for a variety of reasons, of some of which we're going to talk about, they don't do anything about it. And that's again one of the reasons why we are going to be discussing this today, because of how important it is. Financial abuse is abuse. Stealing money from someone is abuse, particularly when they're as vulnerable as the seniors are. Not every senior is someone who's going to be taken advantage of, but naturally, as you get older, your cognitive abilities tend to decline. Some people it doesn't. Not saying that's everyone, but you become more susceptible. You know what I mean?
Sure.
You become more susceptible to something happening to you.
Well, and this is not what we deal with most often. It is something with the elderly that is a situation that we deal with. But we're not just talking about elderly people. This is what you can consider any type of vulnerable person, be it someone who may have some diminished mental capacity, or someone who may have been born with some type of mental disability that has some type of, it doesn't prevent them from functioning in society, but causes some type of delay where they may need a little more help. They may not quite understand things when somebody is taking advantage to them. They're just not as socially, financially aware. So those are things that, we're talking about too. It's not just the vulnerable. Not just the elderly, it's also the vulnerable folks.
100%. It's just one of the more disturbing situations that you can think of. It's the greed. It's the thought that you're owed something that pops into people's heads. And like we were saying at the very beginning, we see this in our office, in our practice as elder law attorneys, almost daily. I don't want to say daily, but I can't tell you how many times in my practice, and at this stage, I'm sure in your practice, as you've gotten more into this sort of thing, someone comes in and the first thing they'll say is, my brother's taking all my mom's money, or there's this new person that's come into my dad's life and they are taking him for everything he's worth. What can I do to stop it? Yeah. And pardon me, what today's show will cover is some of the responsibilities that are on professionals out there. We'll get into that just a little bit, but then we'll talk about how a person, a family member, a friend can see the pattern developing that may lead to elder abuse, particularly with financial exploitation. Signs to look out for. We'll go over how it starts, the very beginning stages, through the middle stages, and then generally, unfortunately, how it ends. And then some things that you can do to prevent it from the get-go. I think this is probably going to be one of our more powerful shows, probably at least with you and me. Couldn't speak to John and Lisa on some of the things they may have talked about that I don't recall, but for us, this would be very important, I think, to the listening audience and the viewing audience for that matter. And I encourage you to hang tight throughout the rest of the hour so you can maybe see if this sort of thing is happening in your family or to your friends or to their relatives. And if not right now, you now may be armed with some extra information to be on the lookout for it.
That's right, because this isn't, like we said, there are physical signs for neglect and physical abuse. These may be things that you haven't really paid much attention that's going on. You may be completely aware of these things happening, but you're not necessarily aware of the significance of them or what some of these things may be leading to. But before we continue, Alex, I want to make sure that we give a big shout out to our sponsors.
Oh, we have sponsors still.
Absolutely, that's what keeps us. That's what keeps us on the air.
And radio works. Right?
That's exactly right. It costs money to be here, and we are very fortunate to have some sponsors: Hospice of Texarkana, Derrickson Memorial Hospice, Edgewood Manor Nursing and Rehab Center, the Barnett Agency, Cowhorn Creek Estates, Texarkana Funeral Home, Red River Credit Union, Reunion Plaza Senior Care and Rehabilitation Center, and Heritage Plaza Nursing Center. Thank you very much for sponsoring the show and helping us get out here and spread some of this information to our community.
To the masses. Now, last week we talked about the Pearl Harbor, or 2 weeks ago, excuse me, was it? Pearl Harbor, and how everybody didn't really realize that, what was it? The Japanese, when they bombed it, weren't really well prepared, and we were talking about planning for the new year. This week, we're going to kind of start off with just a little background information, a little information for you. I don't really know what else to call it at this point. And then from there, we're going to get into the nitty gritty, the patterns to look for, how the abusers, we're not really going to talk about scams necessarily today. We can touch on it if we feel the need or if the conversation leads there, but everyone knows what the scams are, you know. Elderly individuals are susceptible to the scammers. We're looking for something that's more close. A close personal relationship is where we're going to be focusing on. But you were doing some research for this show, and you came across something pretty interesting, I thought.
Well, actually, it wasn't for the show. It was, I had a client call in, or an individual call in the other day wanting to discuss some stuff with me, and their dad had been taken over the past several months, about 6 or 7 months, for, are you ready for this?
Yeah, I'm ready.
$85,000.
Oh, man. 85 grand over a couple months? Are you serious?
Yeah, about 6 or 7 months. So $85,000. He was trying to win some type of prize. And this wasn't an individual, this wasn't a family member. This was some outside entity that was coming in, just convincing him he was going to win a whole lot of money. But, it was just, that was a scam.
Course.
And that's what led me to start looking into some of this stuff to see what it is that we might be able to do. And this is something I wasn't aware of. When he would go to the bank, he started making a lot larger withdrawals than he had ever done. I mean, your
dad had.
The elderly dad. So he's going to the financial institution, and just out of nowhere, he starts withdrawing $4,000, $5,000, $6,000 a pop, over every couple of weeks or every few weeks. And nobody at the bank raised, nobody started saying anything about it. Nobody raised any red flags. Nobody talked to the dad about, what are you doing? Or is there something that's going on? Why are you doing this? They just let him keep withdrawing all this money.
That's a really tough situation because it's his money, right?
Yeah.
He can do whatever he wants with his money. If I have money in the bank, which I don't, but if I did, I could go there and take it out and do whatever I want with it,
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the hard part, to try to figure out, okay, where do we need to be? As if you're an employee, what is my obligation? What do I need to do? And actually, in the state of Texas now, there is an affirmative duty on bank employees, financial advisor employees, and financial advisors and bankers to report suspected financial exploitation.
Wow. Okay. So when I kind of knew about this law, it really hasn't something that's been something, I guess, that's crossed my desk in the sense that I've had a client had that exact same thing happen to them. But please tell me a little bit more.
Yeah,
I'd like to know.
So back in, not this last legislative session in Texas, but the one before that, when in Texas we get together our legislators get together every 2 years. They passed legislation that protects vulnerable persons. So it's not just the elderly; it's any type of vulnerable person from financial exploitation, if you will, and it actually places specific burdens on the financial institutions or financial advisors to take some affirmative steps to once they recognize that something like this may be happening.
And are you saying, so if this exact same situation where the elderly gentleman comes in and starts withdrawing thousands upon thousands of dollars, you're saying that the bank now must or can or should, or someone that the bank needs to do something?
Yeah, there's an affirmative duty once you recognize it. And, as with any legal requirement, there's always some gray area in there, but certainly something that any financial advisors, bankers, bank employees, they need to be aware of it. And, when we come back, we can talk a little bit about what exploitation under the legislation means, what financial exploitation means, and some of the obligations that if you notice things are happening to your elderly parent, vulnerable friend, you can go talk to the financial institution and see if, see what may be going on, what they may be aware of.
Yeah, you can, I think, I know you can ask them, or if they have they're allowed to put a hold on accounts.
Yeah, that's right. So that's something we'll talk about.
All
Catch you in a minute.
So, segment 1 down, made it through it.
So, one of the things that, this is interesting. It's in the finance code. It was originally adopted in Chapter 280 for the extent that anybody really cares about that. And then this last legislative session, they moved it to Chapter 281 of the Finance Code. So if you're looking for it, that's where it's at. You can pull up the Texas Finance Code, Chapter 281, and you can read all about it. I'm sure people are really excited to do that.
If you're a financial advisor listening, if you're a bank employee who happens to be listening, probably should take a peek. In fact, you should probably already know about it.
Yeah,
you would hope.
That would be important to know about that. So, but yeah, I mean, this is something that's real. It's very common for us to hear about financial exploitation and family members taking advantage of their mom or grandmother or granddad. It's sick.
I'll tell you a quick little while we got this break, and for the lucky lot who's watching on Facebook. So I had a scenario where there was this son and daughter from out of town who came by the office over a year ago and said, our dad is diminishing mentally and physically, but more about his mental capacity is starting to have more issues. And he met some old lady, really some young lady.
Hey, let's talk about this too whenever we get back. Let's talk about this guardianship proceeding that's going on with the felon. We'll talk about that too when we come back.
We can discuss that.
Yeah.
We can get into some examples.
Yeah, I interrupted you. Sorry.
No. But end of the day, their father had befriended this woman who is now in his life significantly younger, and she would accompany him to one of the local banks here as he withdrew money. This was something that sounded very strange to me because, if I were working at a bank and I saw this guy come in with someone much younger and pulling out large sums of money, it might raise some red flags, I would think. And she basically cleaned him out. He ended up putting her on the account, and she did clean him out.
Wow.
Which was incredibly frustrating to hear. But we ended up doing some work to make sure she couldn't take his house from her, and or she couldn't take the house from him, and some of his collectible cars that he had or older vehicles. But it was too late for the money. Money was gone.
Yeah. And that's once it's gone, it's gone. Nothing you do.
The bank and police had known about this law, perhaps. They could have put a freeze on the account. Or,
that's right. This is what we'll talk about. So.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's just one of a
number. All right, we're about ready to go back.
1071. Now back to Aging Insight with John and Lisa.
Hey, we're back with Alex and Ben today. In the studio. We left off. We've been talking about financial exploitation of the elderly and vulnerable adults or people, and this is a real thing, Alex. And it's a common thing.
Yeah, it's way more common than you would think, or maybe you do understand exactly how common it is, but maybe it hasn't affected you or your family. It always could.
Or maybe you think it hasn't affected you and your family.
Right. Part of the thing that I guess what we'll get into as we really hash out what these abusers do and their MO, their methods, their methodology is how they will establish these confidential, trusting relationships for the wrong reasons. But, you have that classic story of the caregiver that comes into the picture. And everyone loves him or her, right? Everyone loves them. They're so good to mom and dad, and mom and dad definitely think they're the greatest.
Oh, yeah.
But in the back of their mind, all they're trying to do is follow the steps we're going to talk about here in a bit in order to get to that money.
They may make a good coconut pie.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. They're going to do everything they can.
Yeah. Well, when we left off, we were talking about this legislation that has been passed in the state of Texas that puts a duty on financial institutions and financial advisors for financial exploitation of vulnerable individuals. So, you may be asking, well, what does that even mean? What is exploitation? And the legislation actually defines it, and essentially it's exerting undue influence to cause someone to act in a way that's inconsistent with the person's relevant past behavior. So in the situation I'm talking about earlier, where the guy had gone through about 84 grand over the period of 6-7 months, well, he had never been to withdrawing $5,000-$6,000 at a time. All of a sudden he starts doing that. Should raise some red flags at the financial institution with somebody.
Right. It's never a guarantee. Maybe he just really wanted to take the cash out and go off to the casino and gamble. Who knows, right? But like you said, the key word is it should raise red flags.
And now the financial institution actually has a mechanism to do this. If they notice something like that is happening, they have the ability to actually place a hold on the individual's account or just on an individual transaction that they think may have some undue influence in causing that to happen. And the good thing for the banks is if they do place a hold on the account for legitimate reasons, for their suspected abuse financially of the account holder, they're actually immune. So it provides them with a level of comfort knowing I can do this, I can protect this person, and there's not going to be recourse for me if I do, as a financial institution, place a hold on the account.
So I think just in more basic terms, what that means is if the bank does, let's use your example, a gentleman had been withdrawing all this money. If that had raised the red flags and the bank was like, this is very strange, we think something might be going on here, and they put a hold on his account, froze it, but then down the line come to find that he was actually taking out money because he really wanted to go to the riverboats or whatever, they would not have, the gentleman would not have any legal cause of action to sue the bank for keeping him from this money. They would be safe.
That's right. Unless, and again, we always get in gray areas in the law, unless there was some type of bad faith or malicious purpose on the part of the bank. Right. In doing that. But if they have a good faith basis to believe I need to do this to protect the account holder, then they have that ability to do that without having to worry about any recourse. But that does raise the question in my mind. Well, what if they notice it or should have noticed it, but they do nothing?
Well, frankly, I don't know what would happen. Is there any punishment for the bank? Is this new, what was it, House Bill 281, or what was it called?
It's been codified in Chapter 281 of the Finance Code.
Finance Code?
Yeah.
Does it have anything about what would happen to a bank? Were they to knowingly, I guess, or should have known that this was going on, but did nothing?
Now, with a lot of legislation, it often raises more questions than it does provide answers.
Of course.
And so that's one of those situations here. Is there actually a duty, an affirmative duty on the bank to do it? Yes. But if they don't, then what happens? And there's no recourse, or at least no recourse specifically outlined in the legislation that would allow a family member or somebody to come in and file a claim against the financial institution or financial advisors. But that doesn't mean that there's not a potential claim, such as a negligence claim, that could be brought. But this is all so new
that it's only 2 years old.
Yeah, and nobody, it hasn't been tested yet, as far as I was able to determine. But the bank, the financial institution, the financial advisor, they're immune if they do something. But who knows what's going to happen if they don't?
I guess let's make sure that we've been talking about banks as the example. This does go for retirement accounts. When you say financial advisors, people who are holding your stocks, your bonds, your mutual funds, whatever.
Yeah, it's not just banks. Yeah,
because that's where people have most of their money, actually, is with the financial advisors.
Yeah,
they're the ones that got to be on real high alert.
Yeah, and I mean that if somebody starts coming in and making withdrawals early from a retirement account, there's financial penalties for doing that. And so if someone's willing to take on those financial penalties, why, should the financial advisor be saying, whoa, hold on just a second?
Especially if they maybe sense there's some diminished capacity.
Yeah.
Some, if someone's sharp as a whip, is that what it is? Sharp as a knife?
Yeah.
What's the other one? Sharp as a whip?
Yeah.
What's the whip?
I don't know.
Anyway, but if someone's got a perfectly clear mind and they're going in there taking out money, it's probably not a big deal. They're using it maybe to fix up their house or something. But if there's some diminished capacity, you're a financial advisor or a banker, better be careful out there.
Yep. All right, segment 2 down.
Segment 2 down.
So one thing, and we didn't hit on this, but so what does a bank have to do? What are the reporting obligation, or what are the investigative obligations? So if something happens,
talk about this as I run off.
All right. So if something does happen
Outside.
where the bank does make that, the bank does come in and say, hey, something, or an employee, or I keep saying bank, but financial advisor, whatever it may be, one of those employees says, hey, something crazy's happening here. We need to look into this. And they report it to the bank. Well, what are the obligations that they have to do? And they actually have to make a report. I got to look at it. They've got to make a report to the correct Texas agency. And so that report, they have to actually dig into what's going on, what's the basis for this, and do some research into trying to figure it out. And the report has to actually be sent to the state to figure out, what's going on. Is there actually some financial exploitation taking place here? Is there something that the state needs to get involved in? So yeah, it's a very real thing, but there's still so many questions out there as to exactly what the report has to entail, what has to be done, to what extent do these things have to be investigated. But the obligation's there, and if you suspect something is going on, then you might want to raise that issue with your elderly parent, grandparents, financial institution, or financial advisor. Say, hey, you need to look into this. And allow that affirmative duty on their part to kick in. So lots of things in here. There's so much that we could get into, but we really want to dig into going beyond just what a financial institution's obligations are and get more into what are some of the things that we need to be looking out for. And if you are one of those bank employees out there, financial advisor employees, these are things that you can be looking for if you're kind of somewhat aware of them. What can be done, and these signs that may not be manifesting themselves in a very clear way, but what's going on? So welcome back.
Yes, thank you.
I was just talking about what the bank has to do, the financial institution has to do, maybe what they need to be looking out for.
Gotcha.
So
when are we back?
Very quickly here.
Pretty soon.
Yeah. Well, no, not very quickly. We got a few more minutes, couple more minutes, but
I can't hear it. So you're not yours.
Have we not turned it up?
Okay. What's
There we go. A little bit in the background there.
Yeah, I got it now.
Okay.
So I'm thinking that it would be good to hit on signs that the public could be on the lookout.
Yeah, that's exactly what I said we're going to go into. We could go into this so much more, but I think we've covered enough of that. It's important to let our listeners know what are some of the things that that you need to be looking at for you as a son or grandson, granddaughter, friend. What can you be looking out for to see if there may be some financial abuse going on? And a lot of times people don't even know what's happening.
Yeah, I know.
And we're going to get into some percentages, and y'all get the inside scoop. There was a study done recently, a poll conducted, if you will, and 6.4% of elderly individuals admitted that they had been a victim of financial exploitation. But when they started asking questions of, has A happened to you? Has B happened to you? Has C happened to you?
Right.
All these different actual
things
events
that actually are abuse.
Yes.
That they didn't think would be.
Yeah. 41% admitted that at least one of those things happened to them. So even the folks that were being exploited, they didn't even realize it was happening. or at least a vast
more
majority of them.
common than you would even
Yep.
think, man.
Yeah, it's kind of like that lobster.
Yes.
You know, you put the lobster in the pot and you just slowly turn up the heat, and before the lobster realizes it, he is cooked.
That is a very, very good analogy. That's an analogy.
Yes.
We're calling that an analogy. Yes.
Yeah. So
I always get like irony, you know. I never really truly know what irony is.
all right, here we go.
I know what an analogy is.
Yeah, we know you did. Yeah. We're just making small talk.
903-793-1071. Now back to Aging Insight with John and Lisa.
Welcome back to Aging Insight with today John and Alex.
John. Who's
John. How do you
Are you John?
Ben
I
and Alex.
I thought you were
Yeah.
Ben.
Yeah, I'm not John.
Okay.
John doesn't want me to be John, and I don't know if I want to be
I
John.
don't know if you do either. Man. He does sign our paychecks.
He
so-
does sign our paychecks, but
Anyway, I'm Alex Gomes. Again, this is Ben King. We've talked for the first 2 segments today, if you were fortunate enough to listen to those, about elder abuse. We were talking about it more from the perspective of kind of the obligations of those who may be in charge of your assets, financial advisors or bankers, and what they may need to do or what they should be doing if they notice the telltale signs that there's some sort of financial exploitation going on. But I think we're going to pivot here for the second half of the show and talk to the public at large and give you guys maybe some information you haven't thought about in the sense that you could be looking out for this, or maybe it is happening and you're not realizing it. It's what we would like to call the abuser's playbook, the elder abuser's playbook. It's what they do, the signs that we see all the time. They repeat themselves in almost every situation where somebody will get to the final point at which they are financially exploiting an elderly citizen.
and before we get there, Alex, one of the things that we have discussed earlier in the show is that people may not even realize this is happening.
Right.
The elderly or vulnerable person may not realize it's happening, and chances are they don't realize it's happening. But also those people around them may not realize what's happening. And there's a study that was done recently that showed when elderly individuals were asked if they had ever been taken, scammed, financially exploited, only 6.4% admitted that they had been. So that sounds like a very small number. We've been talking that this is a big problem, and for only 6.4% of these individuals that were surveyed to say, yeah, that's actually happened to me, is really doesn't sound like a lot. But in the survey, when they started going into, well, has this happened to you? Has that happened to you? And started giving examples of what financial exploitation entails, actual real life examples, 41% said, yes, I have had one of those things or more of those things happen to me. So here, that number jumps from 6.4% thinks that they have been, but once you start digging into it, giving them examples, they realize, well, yeah, that has happened. And so they have actually been suffered from some type of financial exploitation. For example, we can get more into these things later. Someone admitting that someone has taken a valuable possession from their home. One of these individuals that we're going to talk about that establishes this relationship, they've taken something valuable from the home, or
that's theft. That's taking something that's not yours. That's abuse.
Or convinced them to make a loan to them so that they can pay their own bills. Those are just a couple of examples. But once you start digging into those things, folks say, well, yeah, that has happened to me. So yeah, maybe you are being financially exploited, or maybe it is an innocent, isolated situation. But these are certainly things you've got to be on the lookout for if these things are happening, because, and maybe it starts out as an innocent situation. Hey, I'm behind on my electric payment this month, says your caretaker. They're nice enough to give them the money to cover for it. And then they realize, wait a second.
I just got a yes, didn't I?
Yeah, I just got a yes. That was pretty easy. And then maybe it evolves into something, or maybe they are just out and they are just a bad person from the get-go and they just start doing it. But let's talk about what the MO is, what the playbook is, and let's see if we can get through some of that this segment.
Okay. So the first thing to be on the lookout for, and this is really a public service announcement, really more than anything, right? This is things that you, if you are a senior, could be looking out for that may be happening to yourself. These are also things you could be looking at that may be happening to your friends who are seniors. This also goes out to the relatives. If you're younger and you're noticing this is happening to your parent, to your neighbor, to your grandparent. These are the things to be on the lookout for. First thing that an abuser will do is establish a confidential relationship.
What do you mean? What do you mean by confidential?
It's one where there's a atmosphere or an element of pure reliance on that person. Confidential. Okay. So let's start with this. These confidential relationships may already be established. Okay. I don't know the percentages here, but far and away, the most common abuser is a relative. The trust is already there, right? You're an elderly individual, you trust your grandchild. You're an elderly individual, you trust your own child. You trust your blood. So once that, they can skip the establishing step, because like I think we said very earlier in the show, or much earlier in the show, it was the stereotypical caretaker situation. That's a new individual that comes into someone's life. You didn't need a caretaker, now you do. That caretaker comes into the picture, and well, that caretaker now is providing you with your food, cooking it, getting it, giving you your meds, perhaps even it's assisting you with bathing, so on and so forth. So you begin to trust that person. If the caretaker is a potential abuser, they are doing this in order to fulfill their job requirements, one, but also start getting that trust built up, that confidential relationship.
What about an elderly person that's kind of lonely, and somebody from the opposite sex starts showing them a little bit of attention? We've got a very heated guardianship proceeding going on right now, and this is shocking.
Please get into it. Yeah, I'd love to hear a little more about it.
The elderly gentleman, he was a lonely guy. He was single. This lady comes in, she starts, bringing him a pie over and trying to get her way in. And this wasn't the first person that she's done this to. And she had actually been convicted of financial exploitation of the elderly and did time in prison for this. And the entire time she's in prison, he's still writing to her, talking to her. And in fact, he went and picked her up from the prison the day she got out.
Well, I think that also, that's shocking, right, to hear, but not really that shocking to us who practice in this area of law. But it's sometimes there's nothing you can do when it's gotten to the point that it clearly is there, other than attempt maybe to go for a guardianship, like's happening here. But if this could have potentially been nipped in the bud earlier by knowing that these signs were there, that this lady was coming into his life, and she was capable of doing this sort of thing, might have been preventable. It might have been.
Yeah.
But you can't stop a person from doing what they're going to do in many instances, right?
No, and if something as shocking as that can happen, then imagine how easy it is to subtly take advantage of somebody financially.
Oh, absolutely.
So
it's this established relationship. You either are already there in the picture or you come into the picture.
And what's the next thing? You had said establish. What else we have? What's the next thing?
They start to isolate the person. Okay, so the relationship's there, the trust is built, and now what we see, and I've had people after I've talked about this in front of groups come up to me after and say, everything you're saying is the exact same thing that happened to person X, Y, or Z in my life.
Yeah.
So this is not just me making something up. Okay. This is what we see all the time.
And when you say isolate, what do you mean by isolate?
Okay. They isolate them. They take the individual, and maybe now instead of going to that church meeting they go to weekly, the caretaker or the whoever this potential abuser is says, you don't need to go this week. Why don't you just hang around here with me? You got everything you need here at the house. Then the next week, you don't need to go this week either. And then that progresses to them never going back to that church meeting, that bingo, that coffee.
One thing I've also seen is the person who's trying to do this isolation screens phone calls or maybe emails.
Incredibly common.
Yeah, and makes it act like, listen, your kids aren't even trying to contact you anymore. They don't love you. They don't care for you. If they did, they'd be calling you all the time. They're trying to get through to them, but this person just isn't letting them talk to their parent.
This is incredibly common when the kids live outside of the area, when the kids aren't there and can't be there. We'll get into just a little bit more on the last segment.
Listening to Aging Insight with John Ross and Lisa Schollmeyer. Have a question? Call 903-793-1071. More Aging Insight in a
feedback
moment.
that last time. Now we're talking
Home Alone.
Now we're talking technical stuff here. I forgot to turn the internal monitor off in here, so I hope we didn't have a lot of feedback over the radio on that. Maybe not. Otherwise, that was if you were listening on the radio, hope it wasn't that bad. Let's see what we got here. All right. Smart as a whip, sharp as a tack, dull as a knife. Thank you, Jim Burnett on Facebook for getting that far. So appreciate that very much.
Smart as so that was the whip. Someone's actually
I knew it was something. You know, I'm so frazzled this morning. It has been. I don't know. I'm just frazzled. So maybe I would have.
I promise I actually have a law degree, and I was smart enough to get through law school. I just don't. Is that an idiom?
Oh, man, you're
sharp as a whip.
Oh my gosh.
Sharp as a knife.
Let's not ask questions that make us sound even more foolish today.
I don't think that's an idiom. I don't know.
It makes me sound like an idiot. Maybe,
yes.
Yes. But anyway, so yeah, establish a relationship. Maybe it's a pre-existing, family relationship or friend, existing caretaker.
Could be the gardener that noticed that someone's alone. I encourage y'all to look up the Swiss Avenue story of the elderly woman that lived in Dallas in a palatial house on Swiss Avenue, which is a very historic street with the original big houses in Dallas are there. The lady lived in there. I can't remember her last name. But if you Google it, Swiss Avenue abuse, these two guys came into her life, and oh man, it's like a 5-part expose that they wrote about in the Dallas Morning News.
Ugh.
Everything we're talking about today happened there.
Sick.
Yep.
Sick.
Absolutely.
So we have established or an established relationship. Isolate. We talked about that.
Yeah.
Either
if we weren't so strapped for time, we could get way more into the isolation. That's a huge deal that you need to be on the lookout for.
Yeah. So you got isolation, either them saying, nah, you don't need to go to that. And they try to convince them not to go see friends or former acquaintances, try to end those relationships in whatever way possible so that they're not.
You become completely reliant on that person. That's what it is. It's isolating them to the point of full, is it reliant? Reliant. I mean, you're 100% reliant on the caretaker or the relative now that you've been separated essentially from your family. It's terrible, but unfortunately, it's the way that these abusers work. It's part of their playbook. Yeah, we wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't the exact same thing that happens all the time.
Yeah. Hey, we got another question out here on Facebook. Are we? Yep.
We can address it if we need to.
Hey, welcome back to Aging Insight with Alex Collins and Ben King. We are discussing the abuser's playbook, if you will, the individual that is going to be trying to financially exploit, take advantage of an elderly person. What are the steps that they're going to do? And the first one we talked about earlier was establish a relationship. It may be a pre-existing established relationship. And we just talked about isolating the individual, trying to keep them from former friends, former acquaintances, family members, and the ways that they can do that so that the person being abused or being taken advantage of becomes solely reliant or as reliant as possible on the caretaker, on that family member, on that abuser that's trying to take advantage of them. So those were the first two things that you really need to be on the lookout for. Alex, what else do they need to be looking out for?
Okay, so if you've noticed that a grandparent, a friend, a church friend, someone has stopped coming, to the meetings, is stop doing this, is no longer around, and there's maybe a new person in their life or one single person in their life, maybe even a couple, then odds are something is on the is coming up around the corner in terms of the elder abuse. So the third thing these abusers start doing once they do have that isolated individual is they start asking for stuff. And they're nice at this point. They're still being nice. Hey, you know what? Be real nice if, maybe you can pay for my gas. I do spend an awful lot of, time and on the road getting to your house.
Or buying your groceries.
I'm
taking to the bank.
I was running it's costing me a lot of money to like you said, go get your stuff for you. Maybe you could pay for it. And then, of course, they're buying their own groceries or they're taking your card. They're asking for your card. Hey, you can stay here. I'll go buy everything. You don't need to come with me this time. Hey, what's your online banking information? Let me get in there real quick. I can start paying your bills for you. That's not a problem. Hey, you know what? My kids, man, times have been tough. I need to get some clothes for them this time around, before school, or get some school books. They start asking for things.
What about getting on their accounts? You ever see that happen?
All the time. You go into the bank, you get signed on to an account, or it's really as easy as just getting online access at this point. But yeah, you get your name on the account. That account's yours now. But they start asking for these seemingly innocuous things at first. Maybe, hey, can I get $20? I gotta run and go get some food real quick. I'll get you something too. But the key is when they hear the words yes come out of the person's mouth, or here you go, sure, no problem. They trust you, right? You've already built that confidential relationship, so they trust you.
Yeah, and if you don't ask, the answer is always no.
Exactly. So they're going to ask, hey, can I get that money? Blah, 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 blah. Right? So that happens. They're asking for things. And once they get yes, it's pretty much ball game. Because now, if you say no, what are they going to do? Well, you know what? Maybe I don't need to come in tomorrow. Maybe you don't need me quite as much as you thought. And you've already become so reliant upon them. They've become your one and only, so to speak. And if they're starting to threaten, maybe not. Maybe it doesn't seem like a threat, but they say, "Hey, can I get $100 to go do this?" And you say, "Yeah, I don't know. I don't have $100." They're like, "Okay, well, I don't know if I need to come in tomorrow."
Yeah. So that's kind of what you said earlier. When they start asking, at that point in time, they're friendly about it. They're super nice about it. But then eventually, it's oftentimes where they transition into being more mean about it, and that may be one of those signs that you don't really see as an outside person. You can see if someone is getting closer into someone's life. You can see that, you know what, my grandmother isn't calling me as often as she used to, or my dad's not talking to me, like she's kind of getting isolated. And then you may notice that you go and visit and maybe something's missing from the house, or maybe your dad or whoever has said that they've spent some money on something that just seems kind of weird. So the establish, the isolate, giving money away because somebody asked for it. Those are things you might be able to see, but the mean part that may come out later on from the abuser may not be something that you do see as much.
You definitely may not. And as speaking from my experience, I have had instances where people have come into my office. There's been a senior, and there's been someone who's a non-relative who does all the talking. Hey, I was about to say Lil, but Billy over here, he's one of my best friends. I'm like, you're 40 years younger than this guy. What's going on here?
Yeah.
Well, he says he needs a power of attorney. I'm like, well, he can tell me that himself, can't he? Well, he lets me do all the decision making. There are so many red flags right there. There's so many alarm bells going off. It's incredibly frustrating when I have to deal with that situation because I don't know for a fact whether or not this person, I have to try and hash it out. You know what I mean? Oftentimes that never turns into any work on my end because I just like to avoid the situation entirely, but it's happened right in front of me. Possibly abuse. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't want to be involved.
Well, if we notice these things are happening, we've noticed that maybe money's being spent that seems to be uncommon. We notice that our loved one is just talking to us less. Let's spend the last part of our program today talking about what are things that we can actually do if we notice this, or maybe even preemptively do to prevent it from even starting to happen in the first place.
Okay. This is probably the most important stuff. If you're a senior, you're already at risk to a degree. The single most important thing is to establish or maintain your currently established relationships. Don't let a new person come into your life and force you away from the people that have been there for you. This new caretaker comes in. Don't let that caretaker, for all the caretakers out there, I'm sorry, it's just the most common situation that we see.
There's a lot of great the majority of caretakers are awesome.
Right, yeah. So I'm nothing against caretakers. It's just the most common situation. So this new caretaker comes in. Don't let them stop you from going to that church meeting you go to every month. Bingo. Coffee with your buddies. Don't let that happen. Maintain that relationship. And this also goes for the friends. Don't let your friend have that happen to them. Go to their house. They didn't show up. Check on them. Give them a call. Who's answering? Random caretaker. Can't talk. He's not feeling good. Happens week after week. Now something may be going on.
Yeah, if you have coffee with somebody every morning at the local cafe, and all of a sudden their attendance becomes more sporadic and drops off, maybe entirely, or maybe just more sporadic, go talk to them. Go knock on their door. Go see them and see what's going on.
Another thing you can do is just get out ahead of it while you are fully competent and capable. Go get power of attorneys done. Get trusts set up. Not saying everyone out there needs a trust or anything like that, but having legal work done in advance takes the potential for someone to try and take it from you out of their hands in many instances.
How would a trust help out with something like that?
Well, a trust, oh man, I don't know if I want to get into all the entire nitty gritty, but essentially you have now put something where another individual or multiple other people you trust have control and the ability to, disperse it.
Yeah, and
as opposed to a random person coming in trying to gain access to it. They'd have to go through another person.
And you make that decision as to who you trust while you are, less vulnerable, while you have more of your senses about you and are able to think clearly.
Other things you can do are talk to doctors, your financial advisor, attorneys about these situations, because if you talk to these people, that's confidential. If some random person wants to accompany you into a doctor's office, doctors are not going to let that happen. And then you can tell them, you think something's happening. Because oftentimes the seniors I talk to about this, they feel, feel like there's nothing they can do. They can't protect themselves. This person, even if they notice something's going on, they still feel very uncomfortable about it because, they're scared of this potential abuser. So go to the doctor. Doctor's not going to let this caretaker, this, gardener that just showed up last week into the office with you for a discussion. Then the doctor can report what's going on.
Yeah. Another thing that you can do is get a credit report. Make sure that you are completely aware of what your financial situation is, in case you have given somebody powers of attorney. Maybe that's being abused now, or you do have someone on your joint accounts and they're not letting you see the finances. You're saying, don't worry about it, everything's okay. And you still, have enough sense about you to know that you should have some money. And then maybe you get a credit report and realize other accounts are being opened in your name, or money's being spent. Your accounts aren't where they used to be.
Mortgage has been taken out in your name. Car's been bought. These things happen. And one, final deal is, man, you already touched on this before. Be careful of getting married when you're older.
Yeah.
Much older.
That is certainly something that
I know you're dealing with that one right now.
Yeah. And, and when you get married, your spouse is going to get some priority in your estate. So they're going to have priority over your kids if that happens. So that is a common tool that someone may use to try to sneak their way in there and take advantage of someone who is widowed, or has lost their spouse and is feeling lonely, and that's it makes you very vulnerable when you get to that point in life.
Yeah, this is again, I know we're coming up here at the end of the show, but this is not a fun thing to talk about by any means.
But it's not fun to have to deal with the repercussions of it. Even less fun to have to deal with that.
Right. So as a quick recap, we've got about 30 seconds left before we're off the air today. If you're looking out for this sort of thing, be on the lookout for a new person in someone's life who has started to potentially separate them from family and friends, or look for a relative who is doing the same.
Yep.
If you are the potential victim, be on the lookout for somebody asking for things.
Yep.
So that you don't want to give them.
Absolutely. Well, hey, we will catch everybody next week. Thanks for joining us today. And thanks again for our sponsors for helping keep us on the air. Everybody have a great weekend.
Okay.
All right. Well, there we go.
The phone started blowing up there for a bit.
Yeah. Were
Were
they trying to call us?
Yeah, definitely. I guarantee that was people listening wanting to share their experience.
Well,
This is the one speech that I'll give where I will guarantee get at least 2 tell me that this exact same thing's happening.
Well, hey, it's common. So everybody, thanks for joining us on Facebook today. If you have any questions about this, feel free to give us a call at the office. Happy to try to answer any questions or see what we can do to help protect you if you think you may be a victim of this, or if you think your loved one may be a victim, what we can do to try to help. So thanks for joining us. Hope all of y'all have a great weekend as well.
Appreciate it, everybody.
All right. Bye.
Bye now. We signing off?
Here we're signing off. Here we go. And hit stop.